"Ma'am, I don't think you can afford anything here." What would you do if someone said that to you? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're there, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because you are not going to want to miss a single second of the absolute train wreck that's about to happen. The words, sharp and cold as a diamond, cut through the reverent hush of Ethelred's, Chicago's most exclusive jewelry boutique. The air on the magnificent mile, usually thick with the scent of money and perfume, suddenly crackled with a tension so raw you could taste it. Dr. Evelyn Reed, a black woman whose bespoke suit alone cost more than the manager's monthly salary, didn't even flinch. A slow, knowing smile played on her lips, a smile that held the weight of boardrooms and billion-dollar deals. "Really?" she asked, her voice a calm, smooth river flowing over treacherous rocks. "That's interesting." What unfolds next isn't just a confrontation. It is the surgical dismantling of a 20-year career in 20 minutes flat. It's the story of how a $7.2 billion partnership evaporates with a single, devastating phone call, and how an entire industry is forced to learn what happens when you judge the wrong person. The manager, Arthur Vance, believes he is a guardian of luxury, a gatekeeper protecting his pristine showroom from someone who clearly doesn't belong. He has no idea he has just profoundly insulted his own boss. He doesn't know she is Dr. Evelyn Reed, the newly appointed CEO of the Viridian Group, the parent company that owns this store and dozens like it. He has no clue that for the last 9 months, she has been secretly, meticulously, and personally investigating the systemic discrimination rotting her company from the inside out. This arrogant, prejudiced manager is about to become a viral sensation for all the wrong reasons. His billion-dollar mistake is about to become a case study taught in business schools, and this single moment, in this silent, opulent store, is about to ignite a revolution in the world of luxury retail. You will not believe what she does next. Arthur Vance approached Evelyn with the calculated warmth of a seasoned predator, a politeness perfected over 2 decades of gently but firmly excluding those he deemed unworthy. His career at Ethelred's had taught him to profile clients in the blink of an eye, assessing net worth by the watch they wore, social standing by the brand of their handbag, and their likelihood to purchase by the color of their skin. The wall of his office was lined with district performance awards, each one a testament to his ruthless ability to maximize profit per square foot. "Good morning," he began, his tone a masterclass in courteous condescension. "How may I help you today?" Evelyn's voice remained perfectly level, a tool sharpened in countless negotiations. "I'm interested in seeing your legacy collection. Something quite special for a significant anniversary." In a place like this, those words should have been an open sesame, unlocking glass cases and summoning velvet trays. Instead, Arthur's smile tightened, a barely perceptible flicker of disdain. Behind him, a junior sales associate, Chloe Jenkins, paused her fawning over Mrs. Eleanor Harrington, a society doyenne examining a $250,000 necklace. "Of course," Arthur replied, though he made no move toward the heavily secured, brilliantly lit alcove where the legacy pieces were displayed. "And what price range were you considering?" From her vantage point, Chloe Jenkins knew this dance. She'd worked retail long enough to recognize the unspoken choreography of exclusion. The way Arthur subtly positioned his body as a barrier between Evelyn and the premium displays. The slight, deliberate pause before answering. The immediate, crass pivot to price before ever discussing the artistry of the product. She'd seen it before, dozens of times, and each time a knot of shame and fear tightened in her gut. Mrs. Harrington, dripping in old money and clutching a handbag that cost as much as a new car, watched the interaction with the detached curiosity of a queen, observing a minor court squabble, her perfectly plucked eyebrows raising a fraction of an inch. "I'd prefer to see the pieces first," Evelyn stated, her voice unwavering. A small, elegant pin on her lapel, the discreet insignia of the Viridian Group, caught the light as she gestured toward the legacy collection. "Quality and craftsmanship are far more important to me than the price point." A muscle in Arthur's jaw twitched. In the background, the soft chime of the front door announced another arrival. David Chen, a young, impeccably dressed Asian man in a Tom Ford suit, entered holding a leather portfolio that radiated wealth and influence. The security guard, who had been lazily watching the street, now stood a little straighter, his attention nervously splitting between the two non-white customers who had dared to enter this temple of luxury. "I understand," Arthur continued, lowering his voice to a tone he likely thought was confidential and helpful, but which landed as deeply insulting. "However, our legacy pieces begin at $100,000. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable starting with our contemporary line over here." The words hung in the air, a velvet-gloved slap in the face. Mrs. Harrington's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. A wave of visible discomfort washed over her. She had never, in her 60 years of privileged existence, been told to start with the contemporary collection. The sudden, shocking realization that she was witnessing raw, undisguised prejudice in her favorite jewelry store sent an unpleasant flutter through her chest. Meanwhile, David Chen had stopped just inside the entrance, the quiet hum of the store's air conditioning suddenly sounding like a roar in his ears. The security guard's eyes flicked from Evelyn to David, then back again. "The contemporary collection?" Evelyn repeated slowly, each syllable dropping like a perfectly cut stone into a silent pool. "And what, precisely, makes you think that collection would be more suitable for me?" The directness of the question caught Arthur off guard. He finally realized he'd strayed into dangerous territory, but 2 decades of unchallenged authority had calcified into a brittle arrogance. "I am simply trying to help you find something within your comfort zone," he said, the words dripping with implications he didn't bother to hide. Near the entrance, David Chen stood frozen, his grip tightening on his portfolio. He knew this script. He'd lived 1,000 different versions of it. The polite redirections, the subtle assumptions, the carefully coded language designed to maintain plausible deniability while delivering a crystal-clear message of exclusion. His phone vibrated in his pocket with an urgent notification, but he ignored it, his entire being transfixed by the ugly drama unfolding before him. Evelyn reached into her handbag, her movements deliberate and unhurried, and pulled out a slim, elegant wallet. "Would seeing my identification," she asked, her voice laced with steel, "help you to establish my comfort zone?" The offer was both a final chance and a perfectly laid trap. Arthur's answer would seal his fate. Chloe exchanged a wide-eyed, panicked glance with another associate. They were no longer just sales assistants. They were witnesses to something that was about to detonate, sending shockwaves far beyond the plush, carpeted confines of their Madison Avenue showroom. The store's security cameras, mounted discreetly in the ceiling, continued their silent, impartial recording, capturing every word, every gesture, every damning micro-expression of a reckoning that was now inevitable. The classical music playing softly through the speakers suddenly sounded discordant, a soundtrack to a corporate execution. What Arthur Vance said next would determine everything that followed. Arthur's eyes flickered from the offered wallet back to Evelyn's calm, unreadable face. His decision was etched in the slight, arrogant shake of his head, in the way he raised his palm in a gesture meant to be placating, but that came across as utterly dismissive. "That won't be necessary," he said, his voice imbued with the absolute certainty of a man who believed he was the king of this small, glittering castle. I've been in luxury retail for 20 years. I can assess a client's needs quite accurately. The words were a lit match in a room drenched in gasoline. Mrs. Harrington's vague discomfort instantly crystallized into cold, sharp anger. She'd watched this same man, Arthur, fawn over her for years, remembering her dog's name, offering her champagne, treating her like visiting royalty. The grotesque contrast between that behavior and what she was witnessing now was not just stunning, it was nauseating. Almost unconsciously, her $1,000 smartphone appeared in her manicured hand. Evelyn's composure remained flawless, but a subtle shift occurred in her posture. She stood taller, straighter. The Viridian Group pin on her lapel seemed to catch the light, a beacon against the dark navy of her suit. "I see," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "So, you have determined that I cannot afford your legacy collection based on what, exactly?" The question hung in the charged air like a bomb with a ticking clock display. Arthur glanced around the store, suddenly, belatedly aware that his private assessment had become a public performance. Chloe had stopped all pretense of tidying the display case. David Chen stood motionless by the door, his portfolio forgotten. And Mrs. Harrington's thumb was now hovering ominously over the record button on her phone's screen. "I am simply trying to provide excellent customer service," Arthur deflected, but his voice, for the first time, lacked its usual confident ring. "We want all of our clients to have a positive experience. By assuming I cannot afford your merchandise? I never said that. You didn't have to." Chloe felt her stomach clench. She had watched Arthur operate for 3 years, seen the coded ways he treated different customers, but never had it been this blatant, this undeniably ugly. The young woman, a single mother of 2, recognized injustice when she saw it, a bitter taste that reminded her of her own past struggles with prejudice in other jobs. Evelyn took out her own phone. The movement was slow, deliberate, and full of purpose. "I think," she said, looking directly at Arthur, "this conversation might be educational for a wider audience." Arthur's face flushed a deep, mottled red. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you not to record inside our store. It is against company policy." "Whose company?" The question was so simple, so direct, it was devastating. "Excuse me?" I asked, "Whose company? Who owns Ethelred's Jewelers?" For the first time, Arthur's supreme confidence began to visibly crumble. "The Viridian Group, but I fail to see how that's—" "The Viridian Group," Evelyn repeated, a strange new note in her voice that made Chloe look up sharply. "Interesting." From across the room, David Chen recognized the shift. As a venture capitalist, he'd seen enough boardroom power plays to know when a hidden ace was about to be revealed. His phone continued to buzz incessantly, messages he now suspected might be far more important than he had initially realized. Mrs. Harrington was now openly recording, her phone held discreetly but firmly, capturing the entire scene. Arthur, sensing the very ground shifting beneath his feet, tried to reassert his authority. "Ma'am, if you are not here to make a purchase, I am going to have to ask you to leave. You are disrupting our other customers." It was his fatal mistake. Evelyn's smile was small, controlled, and utterly terrifying. "Disrupting your customers?" she echoed, her voice carrying with perfect clarity across the silent showroom. "You mean the same customers who are now recording this interaction? The same customers who are witnessing precisely how Ethelred's Jewelers treats people who don't fit your preferred demographic?" Chloe's hands began to tremble as the full weight of the moment hit her. This wasn't just an act of discrimination anymore. It was the moment discrimination was about to meet its consequences. Arthur reached for the radio on his hip, his voice cracking as he called for security. "I need assistance at the main counter. We have a situation." The word situation echoed through the store, reaching every corner, every witness, every recording device, now capturing what was about to become a viral firestorm. Evelyn didn't move. She didn't raise her voice. She showed no anger. Instead, she simply said, "Yes, Arthur, you certainly do have a situation." Her phone buzzed with an incoming call. The name on the screen would have made Arthur's blood turn to ice if he could have seen it. Viridian Group Board, Emergency Conference Line. The storm was about to break, and no one in that room was prepared for the deluge that was coming. "What do you think is going to happen to Arthur? We are about to witness a 20-year career go up in flames. If you think this manager is getting exactly what he deserves, smash that like button and comment the word justice down below. Now, let's watch the fireworks." Evelyn took a single step toward the store's grand entrance, pressing her phone to her ear. Her voice dropped to a crisp, professional tone, just loud enough for the rapt witnesses to catch fragments. "Move the announcement up. Push it to all wire services immediately. Yes, I'm absolutely certain." David Chen finally looked down at his phone. His eyes widened in disbelief at the string of notifications lighting up his screen. Urgent text messages from his partners, a dozen missed calls from his firm's senior counsel, and breaking news alerts from the Wall Street Journal that made his heart hammer against his ribs. The phone in his hand suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The implications of what he was witnessing crashed over him in a dizzying wave. As Evelyn moved away from the counter, Arthur's confidence began to seep back in, a slow return to his accustomed sense of control. He turned back to Mrs. Harrington with a practiced, conciliatory smile, attempting to erase the last 10 minutes as if they had never happened. "Now then, Mrs. Harrington, you were interested in the diamond necklace." But Mrs. Harrington's gaze remained fixed on Evelyn, who now stood silhouetted against the large front window, speaking in rapid, precise sentences, the language of someone accustomed to making decisions that moved mountains. "Actually, Arthur," Mrs. Harrington said, her voice cool and deliberate, "I think I'll wait. I'm suddenly very interested to see how this situation develops." Chloe, emboldened by the shift in power, approached the counter, her usual deference replaced by a flicker of defiance. "Arthur, maybe we should—" "Should what, Chloe?" His authority snapped back into place, a reflex in the face of a challenge from a subordinate. "Handle a customer who clearly couldn't afford our merchandise to begin with?" The words were whispered, meant only for Chloe, but in the tomb-like silence of the store they carried further than he intended. Evelyn ended her call and turned back, her stride measured and purposeful, the walk of someone who had just set vast, powerful forces into motion. Her Viridian Group pin seemed to catch the light in a way that was no longer incidental, but deliberate. "I've been thinking about our conversation, Arthur," she said, a new undertone in her voice that made the hairs on his arms stand up. "There's nothing more to discuss. I've explained our policies." "Your policies?" Evelyn nodded thoughtfully. "Tell me, Arthur, in your 20 years here, how many black customers have purchased pieces from your legacy collection?" The question was a precision-guided missile. Arthur's face cycled through a series of emotions: confusion, indignation, and finally, defensive anger. "I don't see how that's relevant. We serve all of our customers equally." "Do you?" Evelyn's gaze swept across the showroom, taking in every witness, every camera, every person who would forever remember this moment. "Because for the past 9 months, I have been documenting some interesting patterns." She produced a small tablet from her bag, swiping the screen to reveal what was clearly a meticulously compiled database: detailed notes, timestamps, direct quotes, and clandestine audio recordings. Chloe recognized some of the incidents Evelyn was referencing. A quiet word here, a redirected customer there. Moments she had witnessed, felt a pang of unease about, but had never dared to name or challenge. Seeing them all laid out, organized, presented as irrefutable evidence, created a sickening feeling in her stomach and a dawning sense that her entire world was about to be irrevocably altered. "You've been documenting?" Arthur's voice climbed an octave, cracking under the strain. "Research," Evelyn corrected smoothly. "I believe in thorough preparation before making any significant business decisions." David Chen moved closer, his legal and financial instincts now fully engaged. He recognized the methodical, painstaking approach of someone building an unshakable case. What business decisions?" Arthur stammered, though a dreadful premonition was beginning to dawn in his eyes. Evelyn's smile was patient, almost gentle, the kind of smile that preceded corporate takeovers and industry-wide restructurings. "The kind that affect entire corporations, Arthur. The kind that reshape industries." She glanced at her watch, a gesture that seemed casual but felt precisely calculated. "I have a meeting in 20 minutes. A very important meeting about the future of luxury retail, about the companies that will thrive in an inclusive global marketplace and those that will not." The words landed like individual stones, each one building a wall around Arthur, trapping him. What she was about to reveal would not just end his career, it would obliterate the entire foundation of power on which he had built his life. Evelyn's tablet displayed a comprehensive documentation system so detailed and damning it made Arthur's face drain of all color. Screenshots of internal sales data, timestamps of customer interactions, audio recordings of biased conversations, a mountain of evidence proving a pattern that extended far beyond this one single morning in Chicago. "Over the past 9 months, Evelyn began, her voice carrying the clear, ringing authority of a CEO presenting to a hostile board, "I have personally visited 12 of our flagship properties, from Beverly Hills to London. The consistency of the customer experience has been illuminating." Mrs. Harrington found herself leaning forward, her earlier discomfort now completely transformed into a rapt fascination. She was witnessing something she had never imagined possible. The systematic, data-driven exposure of the very discrimination that was woven into the fabric of the privileged spaces she frequented. Her phone continued to record, a silent, digital witness to history. Arthur's radio crackled to life. "Security here, on our way to the main counter." "Cancel that," Arthur hissed into his radio, suddenly realizing that more official witnesses were the last thing he needed. But it was too late. 2 uniformed security guards entered the showroom, their solid presence immediately ratcheting up the tension. The few remaining customers paused their browsing, drawn to the undeniable gravity of the unfolding drama. Evelyn continued, as if there had been no interruption. "Location 1, Ethelred's, Beverly Hills. Time, 2:47 p.m. Quote, perhaps you'd prefer something from our fashion jewelry section. It's very popular." She swiped to the next screen. Location 2, Ethelred's, London. Time, 11:15 a.m. Quote, "These pieces require a significant investment that most people are not prepared for." Each revelation struck like a physical blow. Chloe recognized the coded language, the subtle deflections she'd heard not just from Arthur, but repeated in training manuals and corporate communications. It was the company culture, laid bare. David Chen stepped forward, his venture capitalist mind calculating the cascading legal and financial liabilities. "Ma'am," he said, his voice respectful but firm. "As a concerned observer, I have to ask, are you planning to file discrimination charges?" Evelyn's attention shifted to him, and for the first time, her expression softened with a hint of acknowledgement. "That depends," she said, "on what happens in the next few minutes." Chloe felt like she was holding her breath, on the verge of either fainting or cheering. 3 years of biting her tongue, of watching good people be treated poorly, of participating in a system she knew was wrong but felt powerless to change. It was all crystallizing into this single, terrifying moment of reckoning. Arthur, desperate, made one last foolish attempt to seize control. "Security, please escort this woman from the premises. She is harassing my staff and our customers." But the guards hesitated. Something in Evelyn's unshakable composure, in the damning evidence on her tablet, in the growing crowd of phone-wielding witnesses, told them this was not a typical disruption. "Before they do that," Evelyn said calmly, "perhaps you'd all like to see this." She swiped to a new screen. An email thread was clearly visible, with Arthur's company signature, arthur.vanceethelreds.com, prominently displayed. Subject: Client Demographics Management. Quote, "We need to refocus on our core customer base. Some people simply do not fit our brand image, and catering to them dilutes the Ethelreds experience." The email was dated 6 weeks ago. Arthur's face went ashen. That's taken out of context," he stammered, his voice a dry rasp. "Is it?" Evelyn scrolled down, revealing his official response to a company-wide diversity and inclusion initiative. Quote, "While diversity is important in principle, we cannot afford to sacrifice sales targets for the sake of social experiments." A collective gasp went through the room. Mrs. Harrington's jaw literally dropped. Chloe covered her mouth with a trembling hand. David's professional interest morphed into a deeply personal investment. Even the security guards exchanged uneasy glances. The other customers had now formed a loose semicircle around the counter, a silent jury held captive by the raw, unfolding drama. Evelyn's phone buzzed again. She glanced at it, and her expression became more focused, more urgent. "That's my cue," she said, then looked directly at Arthur, her eyes like chips of obsidian. "I have a conference call starting in 5 minutes, a very important call about the future of our company." "Our company?" Arthur's voice was barely a whisper. "Oh," Evelyn said, a hint of theatrical surprise in her tone. "Did I not mention?" The Viridian Group pin on her lapel caught the light as she adjusted her blazer. "I'm Dr. Evelyn Reed. I'm the CEO of the Viridian Group." The silence that followed was absolute, a vacuum that sucked all the air from the room. Mrs. Harrington's phone slipped in her manicured hand. Chloe's knees visibly buckled, and she gripped the counter to stay upright. David's mouth fell open. The security guards took an involuntary step back. Even the classical music seemed to hold its breath. Arthur's face cycled through a rapid-fire sequence of disbelief, denial, and finally, dawning, abject horror. That's impossible," he whispered. Evelyn produced her corporate identification card and placed it gently on the glass counter for everyone to see. The Viridian Group logo, her photograph, her title, Chief Executive Officer. "I've been the CEO for 9 months, she said, her tone almost conversational. "Appointed after the board decided the company needed fresh leadership, a new direction focused on ethical growth and inclusive excellence. The revelation was a seismic event, restructuring reality for every single person in the room." As a corporate attorney, David had seen hostile takeovers and boardroom coups, but he had never ever witnessed a CEO conducting a 9-month undercover investigation into her own company's discriminatory practices, only to be discriminated against herself, in real time, on camera. Chloe stared at Arthur, then at Evelyn, then at the ID card. Her entire worldview was reassembling itself around this new, terrifying, and exhilarating truth. Evelyn continued, her voice steady and professional. The board meeting I am about to join is specifically to review the findings from my 9-month investigation into systemic discrimination across our properties. She picked up her phone, turning the screen to the assembled crowd. The screen read, "Conference call. Board of Directors. Emergency session." "Arthur," she said, her voice now carrying the full, crushing weight of executive authority, "you are about to become a key participant in a very educational discussion about the future of this company and everyone in it." Her thumb hovered over the green answer button. "But first," she said, panning her gaze across the room, "I think our witnesses should understand exactly what they've just observed, and why it matters not just to the Viridian Group, but to the entire luxury retail industry." The power had shifted. The judgment had been passed. The reckoning was about to begin. Evelyn answered the call, placing her phone on the polished glass counter on speaker mode. The crisp, authoritative voices of the Viridian Group's board members suddenly filled the hushed showroom. The chairman, powerful investors, legendary executives whose names Arthur only recognized from fawning corporate communications. "Dr. Reed," came the chairman's voice, sharp and decisive, "we're assembled. We're ready for your final report on the discrimination investigation." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Arthur's face was now a sickly, pale white. Chloe grabbed the edge of the counter for support, her knuckles white. Mrs. Harrington's phone, still recording, captured every damning word as it dawned on everyone present that they were not just witnesses. They were participants in the making of corporate history. "Thank you, Chairman Morrison," Evelyn responded, her voice calm and clear, echoing through the store. "I'm pleased to report that my undercover investigation is now complete. I have comprehensive, documented evidence of systemic discrimination across 12 properties, spanning the last 9 months. Chloe realized, with a jolt, that every uncomfortable interaction she had ever witnessed, every moment of coded language she had let slide, every time she felt sick to her stomach but remained silent, had been meticulously documented by the company's own CEO. The immense weight of her complicity and the sudden, dizzying possibility of redemption crashed over her at the same time. Furthermore, Evelyn continued, her voice hardening slightly, "I have just experienced, firsthand, the discriminatory practices at our flagship Chicago location. The entire interaction was witnessed by multiple customers and has been recorded on several devices." She gestured pointedly toward Mrs. Harrington, whose phone was still held high, and then angled her head toward the store's own security cameras, which had been silently documenting the entire disastrous encounter. Chairman Morrison's voice sharpened with cold fury. "Are you telling me, Dr. Reed, that you were personally subjected to discrimination at one of our own properties?" "By the store manager, Arthur Vance," Evelyn confirmed. "A man with 20 years of glowing performance reviews and district awards. His behavior today was not an aberration. It was a perfect reflection of the toxic culture we have allowed to fester within this company for far too long." Arthur opened his mouth to speak, to object, to plead, but no words came out. He was a statue of pure terror. Evelyn swiped through her tablet, displaying more evidence for the horrified crowd. "Email documentation," she announced, "reveals explicit discussions led by Mr. Vance about managing client demographics and maintaining brand image through exclusionary practices." David Chen recognized the legal cataclysm unfolding. This wasn't just corporate malfeasance. This was a treasure trove of documented, undeniable civil rights violations, complete with witnesses, recordings, and a CEO who had personally gathered evidence that could not only destroy the company, but reshape industry-wide practices. His own phone continued to buzz with frantic messages from his firm, but he ignored them, completely transfixed by the systematic, real-time annihilation of institutional prejudice happening right before his eyes. The chairman's voice boomed from the phone speaker. "Dr. Reed, what are your recommendations?" Evelyn's response was immediate, decisive, and ruthless. First, the immediate suspension, pending termination, of all personnel directly involved in discriminatory practices. Second, a mandatory, comprehensive retraining program for all customer-facing staff, effective immediately. Third, the implementation of new corporate policies with measurable, public-facing accountability metrics. She paused, her eyes locking on to Arthur's. And fourth, the immediate cancellation of all partnerships and contracts with any associated firms that do not meet our new, rigorous ethical standards. From the phone, another voice chimed in. The CFO, Patricia Chen. Regarding that last point, the Viridian Group's exclusive partnership with Sterling and Associates was valued at $7.2 billion over the next 5 years. Given today's findings, I recommend immediate termination of that deal. The number landed like a physical blow. $7.2 billion. The staggering economic weight of prejudice made terrifyingly concrete. Arthur finally found his voice, though it was a pathetic, strangled whisper. You can't. One incident can't justify. One incident. Evelyn's eyebrows shot up. Arthur, would you like me to share the complete documentation with the board right now? The 9 months of systemic patterns across 12 international locations? She swiped through screen after screen of irrefutable evidence. Timestamps, locations, audio files, email threads, policy documents that proved, beyond any doubt, that the discrimination wasn't accidental. It was institutional. Or perhaps, she added, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper, you'd prefer I just read aloud your email from last month about maintaining the right clientele mix? The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, and utterly devastating. At that moment, Chloe Jenkins stepped forward. Her voice shook, but her eyes were filled with a newfound determination. Dr. Williams, she said, her voice ringing with conviction, I witnessed these things. I saw them happening. I never said anything, and I am so sorry for that. But I saw it. I can testify to the patterns. Her words broke the dam. Other staff members, frozen in fear just moments before, began to nod in agreement, their complicit silence transforming into a powerful wave of potential testimony. Chairman Morrison's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Dr. Reed, you have the board's full and unconditional authorization to implement any and all immediate changes you see fit. We stand behind your leadership and your vision for an inclusive and profitable Viridian Group. Evelyn nodded, though her expression remained deadly serious. The changes begin today, starting with new management at this flagship location. She turned her gaze to Chloe. Ms. Jenkins, your courage to speak up just now, despite the potential consequences, demonstrates the kind of integrity we need in our leadership positions. Congratulations on your promotion to interim store manager. Another collective gasp swept through the room. Chloe's knees nearly gave out. Mrs. Harrington let out an audible cry of surprise. David Chen broke into a wide smile for the first time all morning. Even the security guards looked impressed by the sheer dramatic force of the reversal. Arthur stared in utter disbelief as 2 decades of his authority evaporated in an instant and transferred to the young woman he had dismissed and undermined for the past 3 years. The systemic changes we are implementing today, Evelyn announced to the room and to the board on the phone, will serve as a model for the entire luxury retail industry. Discrimination is not just morally bankrupt, it is economically destructive. The old order had been completely and publicly dismantled. A new one was about to rise from its ashes. The conference call continued, a whirlwind of high-stakes corporate restructuring orchestrated in real time by Evelyn from the floor of the jewelry store. Her voice was a steady, commanding force, the voice of a leader who had spent 9 long months preparing for this exact moment, every detail planned, every consequence anticipated. "Arthur Vance," she said, her words echoing across the showroom and through the phone to the board of directors. "Your employment with the Viridian Group is terminated, effective immediately. Security will now escort you from the premises and ensure the return of all company property." The finality was absolute. A 20-year career dissolved in a single brutal sentence. Mrs. Harrington had seen corporate executions before, but never one so swift, so public, and so thoroughly, undeniably justified. Her phone captured the slow-motion collapse of Arthur's face as the full weight of his situation finally crashed down upon him. He was not just unemployed. He was exposed, recorded, shamed, and potentially facing a barrage of legal consequences for systemic discrimination. Arthur made one last, desperate, pathetic play. "This is entrapment! You can't run a sting operation on your own employees!" Evelyn's response was measured, professional, and devastatingly simple. "Arthur, I entered this store as a customer. I behaved professionally, and I asked to see merchandise. Your response to a black woman asking to purchase expensive jewelry was not a sting operation. It was a revelation of your character and your standard business practices." She then turned, addressing the growing crowd of witnesses and the board on the phone simultaneously. This investigation was never about catching individuals in the act of wrongdoing. It was about understanding why our company's stated values were not translating into our customers' experiences. "The answer," she said, glancing at the now empty space where Arthur had stood, "is now painfully clear." Chairman Morrison's voice came through the speaker again. "Dr. Reed, what are the immediate operational changes you are implementing?" Evelyn's Viridian Group pin caught the light as she straightened her blazer. The same pin Arthur had dismissed, the same symbol of authority he had failed to recognize. "Chloe Jenkins will assume immediate management responsibilities for this location," she declared. "David Chen," she said, nodding toward the young venture capitalist who had remained riveted by the unfolding drama. "I'd like to have a conversation with you about joining our legal team to help us implement new, industry-wide anti-discrimination policies." David's eyes widened in shock and excitement. Yes, absolutely. I'd be honored." Chloe stood in the center of her transformed world. 3 hours ago, she was a sales associate living in fear, afraid to challenge the discriminatory practices she witnessed daily. Now, she was the manager of a flagship store on the Magnificent Mile, armed with a clear mandate to reshape the very culture of luxury retail. The responsibility was both terrifying and exhilarating. Evelyn continued her systematic transformation of the company. All staff across all locations will undergo comprehensive sensitivity and inclusivity training beginning tomorrow. We are implementing new hiring practices, new customer service protocols, and new, transparent accountability measures. She then addressed the store directly, her voice ringing with passion. "Every single person who enters an Ethelred's Jewelers, or any Viridian Group property, deserves to be treated with respect, with attention, and to be given access to our finest products based on their interest and their courtesy. Period." The 2 security guards, who had initially been called to escort Evelyn out, now stood at attention, a new understanding dawning on their faces. They were witnessing the birth of the very corporate policies they would now be expected to enforce. As the guards began to escort a broken Arthur toward the exit, he made one final, pitiable attempt to salvage a shred of dignity from the wreckage of his life. "You've destroyed my career over political correctness," he spat, the words hanging in the air, a perfect, final monument to his own profound ignorance. Evelyn's response was quiet, final, and heard by everyone. "I have ended your career, Arthur, because you used your position of power to deny service to customers based on the color of their skin. That is not political correctness. That is basic human decency, and it is very, very smart business." The impromptu courtroom of assembled customers, staff, and witnesses had watched institutional power confront institutional prejudice, and had seen, for once, discrimination face real, immediate, and devastating consequences. Several were still recording, understanding that they were documenting a pivotal moment that would ripple far beyond the walls of this single Chicago showroom. Evelyn addressed them directly. What you have witnessed today represents a commitment to change that extends far beyond the Viridian Group. We will be sharing our new policies, our training programs, and our findings with the entire luxury retail industry. She looked directly at Mrs. Harrington. Mrs. Harrington, your documentation of today's events will be crucial evidence in our industry-wide initiative. Would you be willing to participate in our new advisory committee for inclusive luxury experiences? Mrs. Harrington, still holding her recording phone, nodded emphatically, a new fire in her eyes. Absolutely. This needed to happen a long time ago. The conference call continued, with board members enthusiastically approving massive budget allocations for the new training programs, diversity initiatives, and the implementation of measurable inclusion metrics across all global properties. The CFO, Patricia Chen, her voice crisp and clear, came through the speaker. The financial projections for our new inclusive business approach show significant potential for revenue increases in untapped markets. Discrimination wasn't just morally wrong, it was economically stupid. Evelyn nodded in agreement. When we welcome everyone who appreciates luxury and craftsmanship, we expand our market exponentially. Exclusion was limiting our own success. She finally ended the conference call and addressed the store one last time. The changes beginning today will create the luxury retail experience our customers deserve, and one our employees can finally be proud to provide. As Ahan-faced Arthur was escorted through the exit, his 20-year career over, his discriminatory practices exposed and documented for the world to see, he paused and turned to Evelyn one last time. "You could have just fired me quietly," he rasped. "Did you have to humiliate me publicly?" Evelyn's response carried the weight of every person who had ever been made to feel small, unwelcome, or unworthy in a space where they should have been celebrated. "Arthur," she said, her voice devoid of malice but full of profound truth, "today I experienced public humiliation at the hands of someone who judged me by my appearance rather than my character. The difference is, I didn't deserve it." The transformation was complete. A new standard had been set, not just for the Viridian Group, but for an entire industry. 6 weeks later, Ethelred's Jewelers on the Magnificent Mile buzzed with a vibrant, welcoming energy that would have been utterly unrecognizable to anyone who had witnessed the tense, ugly confrontation that had transformed everything. The same magnificent crystal chandeliers cast the same dazzling rainbows of light, but the entire atmosphere beneath them had fundamentally changed. Chloe Jenkins stood behind the main counter, no longer timid and uncertain, but radiating a quiet confidence earned through genuine success, not authority demanded through a title. She was reviewing sales figures that told a story more remarkable than any gemstone in the store. Customer satisfaction scores were up a staggering 40%, referral business had doubled, and overall revenue had increased by 35% since the implementation of her new, inclusive service practices. Ms. Coysum. Eleanor Harrington entered the store for her monthly visit, but this time she was not alone. She was accompanied by 3 of her influential friends, women she had personally convinced to experience the new Ethelreds after sharing the viral video that had documented the day of reckoning. That footage, combined with recordings from other customers, had been viewed over 50 million times across various social media platforms, becoming a powerful viral case study in corporate accountability and the consequences of prejudice. "Chloe, darling, Mrs. Harrington called out warmly, a genuine greeting that would have been impossible under the store's previous toxic management structure. "I'd like you to meet some friends who are very interested in anniversary gifts." The interaction was natural, warm, and entirely free of the cold, calculating assessments that had once defined the store's customer service. Dr. Evelyn Reed entered through the same grand brass doors that had framed her first fateful visit. But now she was greeted with genuine warmth and respect from a staff who saw her not as an undercover investigator, but as the leader who had fought for their right to take pride in their work. "Dr. Reed," Chloe said, her voice filled with a gratitude that went far beyond professional courtesy. "Perfect timing. I wanted to show you our latest customer feedback." The tablet Chloe presented was filled with glowing testimonials that spoke of a profound transformation. "I finally felt welcomed and seen in a luxury store. The staff treated me with such respect and expertise. Ethelred's finally understands that luxury should be accessible to everyone who appreciates quality." Just then, David Chen entered, wearing a Viridian Group legal team ID badge. His transition from stunned witness to active participant was complete. He carried a portfolio filled with new, industry-wide policy changes that Evelyn's meticulously gathered documentation had sparked. 17 major luxury retailers, terrified of facing similar legal and public relations disasters, had preemptively adopted similar inclusive practices. The ripple effect was continuing to spread. "Cartier announced new training programs yesterday," David reported. "Tiffany & Co. has completely revised their customer service protocols. Even luxury car dealerships are calling us, asking to license our sensitivity training modules." Evelyn nodded, a deep satisfaction evident in her expression. Sustainable change requires industry-wide transformation, not just the actions of a single company. The store's new culture was most evident in the small, quiet moments. A young black woman entered the store, her posture slightly defensive, conditioned by a lifetime of experiences similar to what Evelyn had faced. But Chloe's immediate, warm, and genuine greeting began to dissolve those barriers within seconds. The interaction that followed was natural, professional, and focused entirely on the customer's interests rather than any preconceived notions about her purchasing power. Within minutes, the young woman was happily examining pieces from the legacy collection, her questions met with expertise and enthusiasm. The six-figure transaction that followed represented not just a sale, but irrefutable proof that inclusive practices create sustainable, profitable business success. 1 year later, Dr. Evelyn Reed stood on the main stage before a packed auditorium at the National Retail Federation's annual conference. Her keynote address, titled "Inclusive Excellence: The Business Case for Dignity," had drawn a standing-room-only crowd of luxury retail executives, civil rights advocates, and business leaders from across the globe. The massive presentation screen behind her displayed a series of striking statistics. Companies that had implemented the Viridian Group's inclusive practices showed average revenue increases of 32%, customer loyalty improvements of 45%, and employee satisfaction gains of 51%. The numbers told a powerful, undeniable story of a transformation powered by basic human decency. "The incident at our Chicago store last year was not unique," Evelyn told the captivated audience, her Viridian Group pin shining under the bright stage lights. What made it significant was that it was documented, it was witnessed, and it was used as a catalyst for systemic, industry-wide change, rather than being dismissed and ignored as an isolated incident. In the audience, Chloe Martinez, now the regional manager for Viridian's entire East Coast operations, watched with pride. Beside her sat David Chen, whose legal work had helped implement anti-discrimination policies across 4 major retail chains, and in the front row sat Mrs. Eleanor Harrington, whose advocacy work on the Inclusive Luxury Council had powerfully influenced consumer behavior across the nation. The question, Evelyn continued, her voice ringing with authority, is not whether discrimination exists in your industry, in your company, or in your community. We know it does. The question is, what are you going to do about it when you encounter it? She clicked to her final slide, which displayed the contact information for the Inclusive Excellence Initiative, the industry-wide program that had grown from one ugly confrontation into a global movement that was reshaping corporate culture. Change begins, she concluded, when one person decides that human dignity is not negotiable and that excellence is never exclusive. The thunderous standing ovation that followed wasn't just applause for a successful presentation. It was a roar of recognition for a revolution that had started with one woman's courageous refusal to accept discrimination and had grown into a systemic change affecting millions of lives and billions of dollars in commerce. As the applause began to fade, Evelyn delivered her final, powerful words, looking directly into the camera that was broadcasting her speech to the world. If you've witnessed discrimination, document it. If you've experienced it, report it. And if you are in a position to change it, you have a moral and financial obligation to act. The cost of inaction isn't just measured in lost dignity. It's measured in lost economic opportunity, lost social progress, and the loss of the fundamental promise that excellence should and must be accessible to everyone. The revolution continues, one interaction, one person, one moment of courage at a time. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Together we can all be part of the change.